was born into it. So I was born into a satanic family, and then into it was quite a small satanic group in the area where I lived, and then brought up for my whole childhood through it. Throughout my younger childhood, I was put through a lot of trauma and torture, and then as I grew up, I started being taken to various rituals where there was a lot of sacrificing and a lot of sexual raping of children, and so it was a lot of pain, hurt, trauma. It started off in the local area, and a local vicar was my controller, and he my handler, and he was very much my master, really. And then as I grew up, from sort of 3 years old, I was in a very big ritual, which I was then passed on to Lucifer and passed on to the Freemasons. And then from 3 years old, the Freemasons took big control of my life and really took it over. And from 4 years old, I was being trafficked by the Freemasons, and a lot of that trafficking went to places like London, and I sort of did a lot of things in London, and then various big houses around the area where I live in England. And eventually I was being trafficked to different countries. I've been trafficked to Germany, Belgium, Holland, Italy. I've been trafficked to the Vatican, and had stuff done to me in the Vatican. And also I was being trafficked as a sex slave from the age of 4, and that went on pretty much my whole childhood, I think, till my very late teens. I was still being trafficked as a sex slave. So that was another part of the whole Masonic setup. It wasn't just ritual abuse. I was being trafficked for sexual abuse, and also for making of pornographic films. I mean, 9 years old onwards, I was being used for pornographic filming. At 9 years old, I was taken to the Tavistock Institute in London, and I went through a mind control program to develop one of my DID identities, to develop that as a memory, a photographic memory. So I was actually used for transferring information, and the Vatican was one of the places I was transferring information to. So because they use people like SRA survivors, because then they're very easy to get through into different countries, and there's no paper trail. I mean, we're talking about back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, and there's no paper trail to follow what they're sending, so they'll use us to transfer the information. They can't use fax machines or teletext or things like that, because then there's a trail. So that's what one of the things I was developed to do. But I don't have memories of meeting people like the Pope or that, or probably high up officials, because you've got to remember that the Vatican will be infiltrated by Freemasons and Satanists. So I would have sort of been met with high up officials, but I don't know of any sort of names. But the whole of Westminster area, there's a big tunnel system, and I've actually had things done inside those tunnels. The DID happens from right from the beginning and carries on till about 8, 9 years old. That's when they develop all the different identities, and they'll develop all these identities to take over the host. Because you look at me, I'm just a host. I mean, even my host was developed to front the world, and then they'll have all these different identities behind that host, which will all have a code to them, and probably a name to them as well, which they will pull out that identity to carry out the tasks they want. So that's how they do it. Because when an identity comes out in me, my host will be pushed aside, so I don't have any memory of what's going on while that identity is carrying out its tasks. So this is how they get away with it. They develop these identities, and each one will have a job to do, or will have something to do with what they want. So they can program each one of these identities to carry out the job they want that identity to do. So whether it be sexual, whether it be transferring information. A lot of my identities were what was being called super soldiers now, which was all part of the New World Order programs, where they developed super soldiers in us to carry out their plans when they bring in the New World Order. So each one will have a job to do. And they will know how to trigger that identity, either by a code, a number, a color, or even various touching of the body will bring out that identity, who will carry out that job for them. The ones which I really struggle with now, having sort of developed all the memories of it, were the adrenochrome parties, which I used to have to attend, and where they literally just brutalized babies and very, very young children to develop the adrenaline in the blood, and then obviously then they kill those children and babies to get the blood, and they either drank the blood, or the really hardcore ones would inject the blood into them, and that is a really bad one which I struggle with. And there was another incident which I discovered quite recently, which actually happened in the tunnels under Westminster, and it was one of their hunting games, I suppose, where they set the children off and then they hunt them down. And I remember this. I was in the tunnel, and there was this little girl, and she was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me, and it was one of the street girls. So it wasn't an SRA's person who's been developed. It's someone they snatched off of the street, and you know, she was so desperate for me to save her and help her, and I was trying to, you know, I was holding on to her, and they came along, and the dog got her and just snatched this dog which they had, just pulled her out of my hand and just ripped her apart. And it was just, you know, having memories like that is just heartbreaking. Yeah, I should have done more, but at the time, it doesn't happen. I suppose you could call it a ritual, but I mean, these parties would often happen in big houses, um, and yeah, there was a lot of prominent people. I mean, I've seen royalty, politicians, famous people, uh, all sorts of people, and yeah, basically they just it's just a party. I mean, it's like a drug to these people. The Satanists of this world, it is a drug to them. So they're getting high on it. Everyone needs to start talking out about it. I mean, there's a change in the world now. Awareness of something evil is starting to build, and I think SRA survivors and anyone who's had any dealings with Satanists need to start talking out and bringing it to the light, and because that's the only way we're going to beat them. I mean, it still goes on now, and goodness only knows how many children are involved with it. So, you know, we need to start talking out to protect the children. And it's not just SRA, it's, you know, when you're involved with the Satanists, it's the trafficking of children, because children are a currency. I mean, they make more money out of children now than I believe drugs and anything else they try and smuggle or dealing in. And we got to bring a stop to it. That's what I feel, because you know, Satanists are running this world, and their their plan is the big takeover. And if they win by taking over this world, then it's going to be an awful place to live in.